A lot of Smite games lately, ranked or otherwise, have been taking a lot longer than they need to. One team gets an early lead but then fails to close out the game and it drags out into the 40 or 50 minute marks and then they end up losing anyways. Not only is this frustrating for the team that got ahead, but games that last this long simply aren't fun for either party. This can happen for any number of reasons. Maybe the team doesn't group up at key moments, or a few players get caught out while split pushing, but one thing I see all too commonly is teams that don't know when to get Fire Giant and don't understand how powerful it really is. Killing the Fire Giant grants each member of your team, unless they're dead, a buff called the Fire Giant's Smite. It gives you 50 physical power, 70 magical power, it regenerates 0.8% of your maximum HP and mana per second, and increases your damage against structures by 20% for 4 minutes. Let's break this up into parts for a minute. 50 physical power and 70 magical power. Imagine how game-breakingly powerful it would be if for whatever reason the red buff glitched and it allowed every member of your team to pick up the buff. The power Fire Giant gives alone is comparable and in most cases stronger than giving your entire team red buff, and it isn't even the main reason to take Fire Giant. Now on to the regeneration. 0.8% of your maximum HP and mana per second. This means that if you have 1500 HP, which you'll probably have more than at this stage of the game, you'll be regenerating 12 health every second, or 2880 health over the entire duration of the buff. In comparison, a health potion regenerates 10 health every second for a total of 250 health over the duration. This means Fire Giant buff is healing you faster than a health potion for much, much longer. And finally, the reason Fire Giant is going to help you close out and win the game. 20% increased structure damage. This means you do 20% bonus damage to towers and phoenixes for free. This, along with your tank having that extra regeneration, makes sieging a breeze. If all 5 members of your team focus down a single phoenix, you can destroy it within 5 seconds in most cases, and if you take down 3 phoenixes, you've all but secured victory. Now you know why you'd want to take Fire Giant, but I believe the main reason teams don't take Fire Giant often enough has to do with the when. A common misconception a lot of people have is that Fire Giant requires a deicide to be taken properly, when in reality, it's possible to take Fire Giant in a 5v5 situation, especially when you're ahead in gold and XP. There are a lot of things you can do to secure Fire Giant for your team, such as counter warding, telling a teammate to split push, or otherwise create a distraction. You don't even need to start attacking the Fire Giant right away. You could clear the enemy's ward and wait for them to come with the replacement ward, then ambush them, or you could pretend to take Fire Giant and then turn on them when they try to steal it. All these things can help you either kill off important members of their team or otherwise keep them occupied, which helps you take Fire Giant and win the game. As for the when in regards to the game clock, depending on how far ahead you really are, you can take Fire Giant as soon as it spawns, but at 10 or even 15 minutes, it is going to be very difficult and risky to do, and it'll most likely drop a few of your teammates to very low health, even if they aren't the ones tanking. This is when you need to be the most decisive about when to take Fire Giant, as there aren't many circumstances where the risk is worth the reward this early in the game, but if you manage to force the enemy team back to their base, or even kill a majority of them, you may be able to catch them off guard with a Fire Giant this early. But keep in mind it is very doubtful you'll be able to take it by the time they respawn or get back to lane, so you'll still want to have a lot of wards up to detect a potential fight or steal. I'd say anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes into the game is the most optimal time to take Fire Giant when you're ahead. Anything before 20 is too risky, and anything beyond 30 means that if the enemy catches you and manages to win the fight, they'll be more than capable of taking it themselves. This doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do it after 30 minutes, it just means there'll be an added risk. Of course, the optimal time can change a little depending on the compositions of both teams, and that's part of the reason I made the time frame so broad, but in the end, it's all about seizing any opportunity you see to take the Fire Giant. But what exactly are the opportunities? When your team is ahead by a large margin, you're for the most part free to force out the Fire Giant anytime you want after 20 minutes, provided you have decent ward coverage and teamfight potential. But in particularly close games, where you're looking to take Fire Giant to secure a lead, it becomes a lot less clear of when you can and cannot take it. Obviously, in this case, waiting for a deicide seems to make the most sense, but if you can get a deicide and have your team healthy enough to take Fire Giant, the game probably isn't that close. Now, for these situations, you want to make sure they're down at least one player, preferably more. Whether they are dead or at low health and need to recall, you want to make sure you are never going to get thrown into a 5v5 situation while Fire Giant is attacking you. Team communication is huge here. making sure you all save your high damage abilities for when Fire Giant gets low, not only so you can burst it down and minimize the possibility of it getting stolen, but so you have them ready for any potential fights. In some cases, even using an ultimate or two to secure the Fire Giant can work in your favor. If you're the support, you're going to have the hardest and most defined job. You should not only be tanking the brunt of Fire Giant's damage and making sure his line attack doesn't hit your damage dealers, but you'll also want to be on the lookout for anyone attempting to steal the buff, and you'll want to CC them as soon as Fire Giant's about to go down. On top of all this, you'll also want to be vigilant and ready for a fight to happen so you can safely disengage if needed. Wards can help with this job a lot, but sadly as a support it'll probably be up to you to provide those as well. Now I've talked about taking Fire Giant well ahead to push your advantage, I've talked about how to take it when the teams are even in golden XP, but what about if you're playing from behind? In short, there's no reason for you to seek out Fire Giant when your team is behind. Trying to sneak it is too risky, trying to force it will get you killed and possibly give them the buff. You really just want to keep playing the game and hope that they forget about Fire Giant altogether. However, if they do decide to go for it, it's probably not in your best interest to just sit around and let them have it. There are a lot of ways you can try to get them off it, or even end up getting the buff for your own team if they get too cocky and end up throwing. Stealing it's one option here, but that requires you to be extremely lucky or for the enemy team to make a lot of mistakes, so I'll be going over the more reliable methods. If you aren't too far behind the enemy team, you could try to fight them on it. Fire Giant can do a surprising amount of damage for your team if you time the fight correctly. With enough timing and communication, you can initiate the fight by stunning one or more of them on top of the molten pools, which can take them out of the fight immediately, as the pools deal 225 magical damage every second and stack with multiple pools. But if they have a substantial lead, the best thing you can do is just try and be as annoying as possible and either scare them off or goad them into chasing after you instead. This can be done with poke abilities and CC, but try not to get too close unless you have an escape of some kind. Otherwise, just keep it warded and draw as little attention to it as possible, because 9 out of 10 times, a fight at the Fire Giant is going to end in favor of the team currently in the lead. And that one time it doesn't probably won't make much of an impact in terms of giving you the lead. That's all for this video. If I missed any important details about the Fire Giant, be sure to let me know in the comments, and until next time, I'm Everything Goat, and I don't have an outro.